Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin warns of further risk to the economy if there are delays in reopening the country. He says it could lead to permanent damage. The heads of the CDC, the FDA and Dr. Anthony Fauci will have to testify remotely at a Senate hearing. They're all in quarantine after exposure to a White House staffer who tested positive. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that New York City will now use non-police social distancing ambassadors. This after videos of violent enforcement by police riled the public. And Australia's Prime Minister says he hopes China will be fair in his 18-month-long anti-dumping probe and won't use it as retaliation for Australia's calls for a virus inquiry. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is warning of considerable risk to the economy if the country doesn't reopen. Job losses have soared in recent weeks, with unemployment now at record highs.
Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin on Sunday stressed the importance of getting the economy going. He warned of permanent economic damage if lockdown measures aren't lifted. Mnuchin told the Fox News Sunday program it wasn't economic issues that caused this. It is the result of the CCP virus. He said reopening will be done in a very thoughtful way, allowing for social distancing. In recent weeks, job losses have soared, with unemployment now at a record high. The Labor Department issued a jobs report on Friday that found unemployment at almost 15%. It reported at least 20 million people filed for unemployment insurance over the past 8 weeks or so. Mnuchin said this was an inevitable result of shutting down the economy, and he expects those numbers to increase before things turn around. But he predicated stronger third and fourth quarters. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others want to send more money to state and local governments next week, indicating they want to vote on another stimulus package next week. But Mnuchin said the federal government did not want to bail out states that were poorly managed. He added that the White House is pushing for a payroll tax cut.
Vice President Mike Pence is not in quarantine and plans to be at the White House today. The news follows reports that Pence was self-isolating after a staffer tested positive for the virus. Spokesman Devin O'Malley said Pence is following the advice of the White House Medical Unit, adding that he is tested negative every single day. A source familiar with the matter says the administration has no plans to keep President Trump and Pence apart. The development comes after President Trump told reporters on Friday that Pence's spokeswoman, Katie Miller, tested positive for the virus. And Pence says he'd be happy to see Michael Flynn back at the White House. The Justice Department has requested the charges against the former National Security Advisor to be dropped.
Vice President Mike Pence commented on Michael Flynn in a pre-recorded Axios interview published Sunday. In it, Pence calls Flynn an American patriot who has served the country with great distinction. Flynn admitted to 2 judges that he lied about his interactions with the then Russian ambassador. Robert Mueller, however, was able to get Flynn to cooperate with his investigation. But Thursday, the Justice Department said it wanted to drop charges against Flynn. A judge still needs to sign off on the DOJ request.
The heads of the CDC and the FDA will testify remotely during a CCP virus Senate hearing this week. Meanwhile, the chair of the Senate Health Committee is in self-quarantine.
Lamar Alexander's chief of staff says the senator tested negative for the virus and has no symptoms. But he plans to stay home in Tennessee for 2 weeks out of an abundance of caution. The Senate Health Committee is scheduled to meet this week to deal with an outbreak. Alexander's office says he'll chair that meeting remotely. Most of the witnesses were already scheduled to testify that way due to their own exposure to the virus. The heads of the Food and Drug Administration and CDC are in self-quarantine, and Dr. Anthony Fauci is in what he calls a modified quarantine. All 3 interacted with someone at the White House who tested positive.
New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio says he's hiring non-police ambassadors to enforce social distancing. Violent scenes of police enforcing measures have been caught on video. New York also has new rules for nursing homes.
De Blasio says New York City will now use non-police social distancing ambassadors after ugly clashes involving police enforcement of social distancing rules were caught on camera and spread online.
But more and more of the emphasis will be on a communicative, encouraging approach through these social distancing ambassadors.
He acknowledged things got out of hand with the previous approach of having police enforce social distancing.
We certainly have seen one video in particular, and there have been some others that have raised concern, and I think they pull at people in a very real and painful way.
He also spoke about cases of CCP virus-related illnesses discovered in children, following New York Governor Cuomo's news about 2 young children and a teenager who died. Mayor de Blasio said doctors are now calling the condition pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome. Medical staff are discovering more and more cases of it.
As of today, there have been 38 cases detected here in New York City. That's up from 15 at the last count. There are 9 more cases that the specifics of the case are still pending.
New York is also requiring all nursing home staff to be tested twice weekly for the CCP virus. The state will now no longer allow sending CCP virus patients from hospitals directly back to nursing homes. The state faced criticism for a March 25th Health Department directive requiring nursing homes to take recovering CCP virus patients.
Social distancing is also a concern for building sites as they start to reopen. One site in D.C. has had to put measures in place before others. Its school project is deemed essential, so work there has already restarted.
One building company in Washington, D.C. got a head start experimenting with what a return to work may look like. MCN Build's school project was deemed essential during lockdown.
100% face coverings, hand sanitizer stations on every project, hand washing stations on every project, the sign-in process, the questionnaire, the COVID questionnaire, temporal scanning, all those are new since COVID-19.
After arriving, workers need to patiently line up for a temperature screening. Then they're asked if they have virus symptoms or if they may have been exposed to the virus. Tasks have also been redesigned to minimize transmission risk.
For the most part, we enforce social distancing, but as you can see, there's guys who cannot. Per their job or per task. It's just not possible 100% of the time.
MCN hired a hygiene auditing firm to make sure all necessary measures were in place. Workers now wear even more personal protective equipment.
It's been really difficult because keeping the mask on all day and working in the humidity fogs up your safety goggles, and it's hard. It's really hard.
But despite the risks and challenges, workers on site are relieved to be back at work.
The restrictions are worth it because we have to work. We have to take the daily bread home, and like many people, we live paycheck to paycheck. We need to work.
D.C. hoped to reopen on May 15th, but the mayor said Friday that's not likely anymore.
A quick-thinking off-duty officer helped save a 24-year-old California hiker who was trapped in a whirlpool on Saturday. The hiker was trying to cross Angel Falls when he became trapped in the fast-moving spring water. Off-duty officer Brent Donnelly, who was hiking nearby, used a strap from his backpack and tied it around a branch so the hiker could grab it. He threw the branch to the man and talked him through the rescue. Angel Falls is a big attraction for hikers along Willow Creek Trail, but is deemed dangerous because of the slippery rocks along the path. And from the CCP virus to murder hornets, the hits just keep coming in 2020. Experts agree the hurricane season could be a busy one too.
Hurricane season officially starts June 1st. Several experts and their models are projecting at least an above-average season, which usually consists of 6 hurricanes and 12 named storms. One reason for the expected increase is that sea surface temperatures have been much warmer than normal. Meteorologists say storm systems feed off of warmer water. The consensus among the experts is that 2020 will be a more active Atlantic hurricane season.
And coming up, Hong Kong pro-democracy protests ramp up again over the weekend. Hundreds were arrested. That and more when we return.
How do we get to this point Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Welcome back. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he expects Beijing to keep an anti-dumping issue free from political motivation. China is considering tariffs on Australian barley amid Canberra's call for a CCP virus outbreak inquiry.
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Monday he hopes China's barley probe isn't retaliation. Australia called for an international CCP virus investigation at the end of last month.
I think we have to be careful not to draw lines between these two things.
He said he expects the anti-dumping issue to be looked at on its merits and not in connection with other concerns. He said Australia has also treated China this way in the past.
We have had anti-dumping inquiries in relation to Chinese products into Australia, and not all of those decisions have been well received. But they've been made on the merits, and I would hope and expect that China would do the same thing.
China is investigating whether Australia was dumping barley into the Chinese market in order to gain a larger market share. The investigation has lasted 18 months. Australian farmers have accused China of intentionally dragging out the investigation for political reasons. Several major Australian grain groups on Sunday said they were told China's proposing tariffs on barley. Morrison said he would be extremely disappointed if this was retaliation, noting that the level of trade in barley dropped by over $1 billion since China began its investigation.
More than 200 people were arrested in Hong Kong during pro-democracy protests across the city on Sunday. A sing-along demonstration at a shopping mall had spilled out onto the streets just before the arrests.
Firing pepper pellets and clearing out protesters, Hong Kong authorities arrested more than 200 people during pro-democracy protests after a sing-along demonstration at a shopping mall. Hundreds of riot police were deployed to disperse protesters across the city on Sunday as protesters chanted for freedom and held up banners calling for revolution. It's one of the first signs of civil unrest returning to Hong Kong, which has largely been put on hold by social distancing restrictions since January. 40-year-old Anok Cha expressed his concerns.
The government has imposed restrictions on gathering and turned it into a crackdown on freedom of assembly, not only for the human rights of citizens, but also for other religious activities. I think this is a gross violation of human rights.
The Hong Kong Journalists Association said some members of the press were prevented from filming, and some journalists who were pepper sprayed were not allowed to receive immediate treatment. 18 people were taken to hospital. The recent arrest of democracy activists has revived the pro-democracy movement, just as the city has begun easing its social distancing restrictions.
Up next, A surge in Russia's virus cases, the world's first beluga whale open sanctuary, and more in European news after the break.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
Welcome back. Russia's virus cases have topped 200,000. France eases its lockdown, and the world's first open-sea sanctuary for beluga whales is about to open in Iceland. We head over to London with NTD's Neil Woodrow.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome to NTD UK, bringing you UK and Euro news. I'm Neil Woodrow. The number of CCP virus cases in Russia topped 200,000 on Sunday, overtaking the numbers recorded in France and Germany. Moscow has emerged as one of the worst-hit cities in Europe.
Moscow accounts for more than half of the country's virus cases and deaths. The Russian capital's mayor said last week that the real number of virus infections in the city was more than triple the official figure. Most restrictions are extended until May 31st. But from May 12th, some measures will be eased, including the resumption of work for industrial and construction companies. But he added it was still too early to reopen sports facilities, restaurants and theatres. Russia has been in partial lockdown since the end of March.
An investigation is underway into a fire that broke out on Saturday at a Moscow hospital, killing one person. Authorities said the hospital was one of the medical facilities designated for treating patients with the virus. Sweden plans to tighten foreign takeover rules to protect key companies amid the economic stress of the pandemic. High-tech firms are seen as the most vulnerable. Since 2002, Chinese companies have bought stakes in 65 Swedish firms, including in biotechnology, semiconductors, lasers and space technology. In 2010, China's Geely Holding Group acquired Volvo Cars. Along with China, Russia is also considered the biggest threat to national security. France is easing lockdown measures across the country, although stronger restrictions will remain in place in Paris and other affected areas.
France is carefully restarting its economy after nearly 2 months of lockdown. In Paris, commuters will need permission from their employers to use the metro or buses at peak hours. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe outlined his plans.
It's a new stage in the fight against the epidemic. It's good news for France, for the French people.
Across France, it will be compulsory for anyone over 11 to wear masks on public transit. Offenders face fines of $140. The French education minister said about 1 million children and tens of thousands of teachers could soon return to school. Hair salons are among the businesses allowed to reopen, although it won't be business as usual. Plexiglass now separates shampooing basins, fewer clients will be accepted, and magazines and refreshments are out to reduce the chances of infection.
Given that we'll have fewer customers to respect the social distancing and so on, we know we're going to be making a loss, whatever happens.
He said his salon lost about $165,000 during lockdown.
Tourists will still be denied the pleasures of a springtime Paris. Except for EU travellers, the nation will keep its borders closed until at least June 15th. French Secretary of State for the Digital Economy Cédric O said France is set to begin using its state-supported contact tracing app by June 2nd. The Stop COVID app for mobile phones is expected to enter testing phase this week. He also said a previously delayed parliamentary debate on the app could be held in the week of May 25th ahead of its launch. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson spelled out the first sketch of a roadmap for easing the UK lockdown last night. He told the British public that they move from staying at home to staying alert. From today, those who cannot work from home, such as in manufacturing and construction, should go to work. From Wednesday, people can do unlimited outdoor activity whilst maintaining social distancing rules. But schools and shops won't open before next month. Mr. Johnson finished by saying that the UK will come back from this devilish illness. Wildlife conservationists are getting ready to release 2 previously captive beluga whales into an open water sanctuary in Iceland. It's the first of its kind in the world.
In this pool on Heimaey Island in Iceland, 12-year-old beluga whales, Little White and Little Grey, are going through their final training. They are going to their new home in southern Iceland, a pen over 340,000 square feet and accessible by whale-watching boats. In this remote bay, the whales can dive and explore the subarctic waters, which resembles their natural habitat.
This is the first time in the world they do it like this, so we are very happy to be a part of it.
Little White and Little Grey spent most of their lives in captivity at Changfeng Ocean World Aquarium in Shanghai, 6,000 miles away. The mission to relocate them began when British-owned Merlin Entertainment acquired Changfeng Ocean World. Merlin Entertainment teamed up with Sea Life Trust to free the pair of female whales.
We hope that by showing that you can move them from an aquarium environment into a more natural space, that we're providing a vision for a potentially different future for those animals.
The sanctuary includes a landside care facility and visitor centre.
That's all from us in the UK today. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Neil. Still to come, a Turkish nurse faces one of the toughest cases in her 20-year career, caring for both her parents who are infected with the virus. Hear her story and more when we return. Welcome back. NASA is making major progress on its Mars rover project, with blastoff now less than 70 days away.
Engineers at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida have started putting the Mars-bound rover into place for launch. The rover and other spacecraft components will ride on top of the Atlas V rocket. These are the first spacecraft components to come together for launch, and they will be the last to separate when we reach Mars. The rover will search for signs of ancient microbial life on Mars. It's part of a larger program that includes missions to the moon as a way to prepare for human exploration of the red planet.
And take a look at this adorable little kid. You're looking at this year's winner of the Gerber's photo search. Her name is Magnolia Earl, and she's making history as the campaign's first ever baby that was adopted. Magnolia was picked out to be the Gerber baby out of 325,000 contestants. Her favorite foods are Gerber's sweet potato purees and teeter wheels, and she turned 1 on Saturday. And Mother's Day celebrations this year required extra imagination. Families found ways to show love without the customary brunches and hugs.
Hilal Dormus, a nurse with nearly 20 years experience, faced the most challenging case of her career when both of her parents were transferred to her ward for virus treatment. Dormus's mother, Hilal Özdemir, was admitted to hospital on April 4th. Only a week later, her father, Yasar Özdemir, also tested positive and became her patient. As their nurse, Dormus attended to her parents carefully, but she had to keep her distance. Both her parents later recovered and were discharged from the hospital. Dormus surprised her mom with a bouquet of flowers on Mother's Day, but hugging was still out of the question.
I am very happy to see that they have recovered. Although I cannot hug them, they will be fine. This outbreak will be finished eventually, and somehow I will hug them. It is very difficult. I told myself I won't cry, but I can't resist. I think it has been 4 months I couldn't hug my daughter.
Seniors over 65 years old flocked to the streets on Sunday after Turkey allowed them to go outside for 4 hours. Curfew was temporarily lifted for elderly citizens who had been under lockdown for nearly 2 months. Across the world, Brazilian musician Rodrigo Cunha and his piano zipped down an elevated highway in downtown Sao Paulo, playing music written by Brazil's most famous composers. Dressed in a dark blue suit, wearing a plastic face shield, and riding atop a modified flatbed truck. Cunha says it's one of the few ways he can serenade the region's mothers, many of whom are forced to spend this Mother's Day without their children or grandchildren.
It's an amazing feeling to be able to share my art so that people can feel good. And I feel good to be here and collaborating and to be part of this history that we are going through.
This will be a hug for all mothers who are now without their children for one reason or another. It is a hug for the city of Sao Paulo and especially for Mother's Day.
While the crisis is still growing in Brazil, it's also been an opportunity for Brazil's famously lively, sociable population to show solidarity in unexpected ways.
So nice. That's the latest updates for now. Thank you for tuning in. You can catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.